Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, and joining me to break down this crazy trade deadline for the Astros is Kenny Van Doren, who covers the Astros for Sports Illustrated and co-hosts the Astros Futures podcast with Jimmy Price. But bigger than all that, Kenny knows the best journalism school in the country from the inside out. Yeah, he's a fellow University of Missouri J School guy. MIZ, man.
Yeah, ZOU. Right when you messaged me the first time, you hit me with the you were from Mizzou, and I had to hit you back with the MIZ. I haven't done that in a couple months now, but it's always good to reach out to a Mizzou Mafia member.
Absolutely. Great to have you on for the first time. And before we dive into the trade deadline, quick reminder to subscribe and comment on YouTube for everybody out there. Even if you're just listening on the pod, go to YouTube. Tell me what you think in the comments. Also, make sure you watch and listen to my conversation with Texans guru, really, Jason Braddock. Had it just within the last 24 hours. He's been over at Texans camp. Tons of great stuff from him. All right, Kenny, let's go through the trades. The first one, Trey Mancini and minor league pitcher Jaden Murray come to the Astros for Jose Siri and last year's fourth-round pick pitcher Chase McDermott. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think first off, the one thing I would throw out there is that Jose Siri was traded. And when you look at what James Click got out of Jose Siri, it's an incredible signing that he had. So he signed him to a minor league deal, who's on his last leg of playing professional baseball in December 2020. And he became a postseason contender. He played center field half of the postseason games once Jake Myers got hurt. And James Click found value in him. And that's something you don't see a lot. And I think that's just a good part of that trade that people are kind of not underlining. And when you look at what Siri brought to the table, he ate a lot of that Trey Mancini trade. You know, he went to the Rays and the Astros really didn't have to give up much. But when you look at what Chase McDermott brought to the table, you know, high strikeout rate, you know, struggled with some command. I was pretty high on Chase McDermott. Jimmy and I talked to him earlier in the season, got a good interview about what he's been working on, his fastball and his other breaking pitches, and a guy who's just going to strike out a lot of batters. And, you know, you've heard that people kind of feel like that was kind of a loss, you know, to lose him in the system. But another guy like Spencer Arrighetti, another strikeout guy from the same draft, college pitcher, is doing just as well in high A. And so those two guys were kind of battling for the strikeouts, for the most strikeouts on the team. And at the end of the day, the Orioles got one of the guys. But my thoughts are for the Orioles is that they probably were all about Chase McDermott for a little while. In the 2021 draft, they were 5 selections after the comp pick that the Astros had in the 4th round for losing George Springer. And so with that pick, they took a different college right-handed pitcher. So he was probably on the radar. They faced him the last 2 summers too, in high A and single A in North Carolina. So he's been around. He's probably been a name they like. And not to mention the Astros, half of the Astros front office is also, former Astros front office members are in Baltimore, not the same ones that drafted Chase McDermott, but he was there. When you look at the return, though, I think Trey Mancini was a safe option. You know, Josh Bell probably would have cost a little bit more. And I think with Trey Mancini in the picture, you got a guy who can play left field, maybe a little bit of right, first base. You know, he's definitely going to play a lot of first base, even with Yuli Gurriel's resurgence as a hitter in the 2-hole. But when I look at, the future of this team, we're recording this 2 hours before the trade deadline. They go after another bat. You're going to see a lot of platooning, a lot of guys moving around. Kyle Tucker might move to center if they grab another outfielder. Trey Mancini can play some left, keep Yuli Gurriel at first if his offense keeps playing the way it does. But overall, it was a safe trade for the Astros, and they get another year out of Trey Mancini in 2022 or 2023 with the $10 million option, and Yuli Gurriel's off the books. So overall, it was a great move by Click, and just picking up Jaden Murray, even better. He moves into the Astros top 30 prospects list. Guy he can strike out a lot of batters, and he doesn't walk a lot. I think he has 2 walks per 9 innings, was what I noticed yesterday. That's a good pickup there, and James Click probably knows him well. He was in the war room when they drafted him in 2019.
Yeah, it was a real interesting deal because it's a 3-way trade between James Click's old club, Mike Elias's old club with the Orioles. So it's like this whole real it's an inter-family deal almost among the 3 teams. And you mentioned Josh Bell. I know a lot of Astros fans. I mean, you can talk to them, Kenny. They're mad that we didn't get Josh Bell. He was a better player than Mancini, but this was about getting value in what you got. And Josh Bell was going to cost you a lot. And the reason why Josh Bell wasn't probably in a lot of trades is because the Nationals were eyeing this Padres deal with Soto, and the Padres have so much more value in their minor league system, so many more top guys that they could offer. And it's a great sweetener to put in Josh Bell and say, now we want this guy, and, raise the stakes on the Soto deal. I mean, you're getting Soto, but to get Josh Bell in that deal too, and add value is a huge deal for the Nationals, really.
Yeah, when I was looking at that trade today, that's a good point you brought up. Is something that came to my mind was Josh Bell really available? When they're looking at a guy, they're trying to package him and Soto, get more out of it. And I don't know if Josh Bell was actually, we knew that he was reportedly on the Astros' minds. They had, trade ideas for him, but was he actually ever going to be there? That's why Mancini just seemed like the safe bet. And you get another year out of him, and the guy can extend to other positions if they want to attack another player next season. I don't think the Astros are as big on rentals. We have seen them, go after rentals in the past, but I think 2-3 years is always a good bet. And if they're trying to contend next season, which they are, Trey Mancini is the best fit because they have him locked down with that team option.
Is it a team option or is it a mutual option?
Mutual option, but I think it's referred as a team option on Baseball Reference for some reason, but it's a mutual option.
Yeah, that's a real good part of the deal too. And the second deal, let's get to that one. Catcher Christian Vasquez, last year of his contract, so this isn't expiring, for minor league outfielder Wilyer Abreu. A lot of Astros fans might not be familiar with that name. And minor league infielder Emmanuel Valdez, whose bat has just been explosive this year in Double and Triple A. What'd you make of this one?
It was a little surprising to me. I think Christian Vasquez fits the Astros perfectly. I think the return was just a little bit like a head scratcher to me. I know a lot of people love Emmanuel Valdez. They love what he's been doing in Double A. He won Texas League Player of the Month for the Hooks, got the promotion to Triple A, and it just kept it alive. The only thing is that Emmanuel Valdez is more of a pure hitter. He's not really hitting for much power, even though he has a lot of pop, but his, at max exit velocity isn't higher than 107. And, the contact percentage isn't the greatest. But when you look at what he could have brought to the table, he's playing more first base recently, second base, third, left field, a lot of versatility there. Him and Wilyer Abreu are Rule 5 draft eligible this winter. And, after escaping the Rule 5 draft last year, the Astros probably didn't really want to have to deal with that again. Don't want to lose those prospects. So might as well just try to get some value out of it. And a guy like Wilyer Abreu has been a walk machine in Double A. At one point, he had more walks than games played, more walks than strikeouts. The guy gets on base. They're both good lefty hitters. And it just, the saddest part of it is I messaged Emmanuel Valdez once, he was reported as the return, and he had no idea. He messaged me and he said, wait, is that true? Because he hadn't heard anything. So that's probably just the human part that we don't really see in those kind of trades, that these players don't know what's exactly going on until the team is going to tell them after it's reported. And just to see that, I think those two guys are going to excel in the Red Sox system, kind of climb through AAA next year and be depth pieces. But I just don't think they were really on the Astros radar for the team next year. In terms of Christian Vasquez, though, they get another bat, another personal catcher out of him. It's just he's can be like Martin Maldonado. He can personalize with those pitchers. And he said in the press conference today, that's probably going to be his toughest thing, is he's going to have to mesh with these pitchers he doesn't know, mesh with the whole pitching staff of starters, relievers, guys he's never played with. But, he hits well, 750 OPS overall, just, a great pickup for the Astros.
How does Vasquez compare defensively to Maldi? Because that's going to be Dusty's argument to still play Maldi a ton. He loves his Maldi. He gets into his guys and he doesn't give them up too easily.
Yeah, I haven't looked too much into that. I think when I first saw it, I knew that, Christian Vasquez has been around for, 10 years now, and he's been a very durable catcher. He doesn't get injured as much. I'm looking up his baseball savant page right now just to look at framing. Maldonado isn't the best framer, but he guns players out. I think he might have one of the highest percentages of throwing out batters. But overall, Christian Vasquez is mid-average framer. He's a 50th percentile in baseball savant. So that's pretty good for the Astros just overall. And it's probably going to be a little bit different for him, not starting as many games. And we know now that whatever catcher they gave the Astros that wasn't Wilson Contreras, they're going to they're going to give more starts to Wilson. And you might see some more pinch hitting from Vasquez, like what you saw with Castro in the last 2 years. And, the tenure for Castro in his second stint with the Astros is probably over at this point. The trade really hints that in the injury. So overall, I think Vasquez isn't going to see as many starts, and I just don't think there's really some outliers that are reasons for him to start more games over Maldonado and Dusty Baker's eyes.
Yeah, one of the things that just kind of goes under the radar, you bring a rookie up, and even if he plays well, he's a rookie, and the experience, not just playoff experience on the field, but being able to talk to guys. I mean, I remember in 2017, I'm sure you remember this, Kenny, when a guy like Brian McCann, yeah, he was a decent catcher, but he wasn't anything special as a catcher at that point. It was later in his career. But everybody that talked to you about Brian McCann would tell you what he was doing behind the scenes. You know, Carlos Beltran, I bring it up. We know about the other stuff with Carlos Beltran, but, you know, there were definitely things that had nothing to do with trash cans or cheating or whatever that Beltran brought to that team as well. And having two guys like this, and then we're going to talk about Will Smith in a second, who just won the World Series. So, I mean, those guys have to be valuable, and especially Vasquez, who is a catcher. It's not just any position. He's a catcher too, like McCann was in 2017.
Yeah, and I think you can compare it to another year. And I think 2020, when the Astros, it was a abbreviated postseason, kind of a weird season, but the Astros didn't have somebody behind Maldonado. And I think the last couple of years, I don't think they want to go back to that. They Dustin Garneau and Garrett Stubbs, who weren't playing a lot, at the behind Maldonado. I think Maldonado played in I think it was 13 games that postseason. He started 12 of them, and that's not something they want to put on their catcher. And just to have that experience behind Vasquez, and just him playing in the postseason too. He's played in a World Series in 2018. He's been around for a while. He understands it, and he can get personable with these pitchers. He has 2 months to really get used to them before the postseason starts. And a guy like Corey Lee, he came up, got a month of baseball in. He didn't have the best offensive month, but they didn't really give him many chances with a bunch of the starters. I think most of his starts were with Jake Odorizzi. But other than that, it's good to see Corey Lee up, and we'll see him back up in September when the rosters expand to 28. But I just don't think like you mentioned, like the experience is needed. The veteran, approach from both of those catchers is needed. And the Astros finally got after that, after they really didn't see much from Jason Castro this season before his injury.
Unless I missed something, I guess Castro is still around on the roster. I know he's injured. I feel like, I don't know what you think, Kenny. It seems like this could be an injury that they're trying to extend to where you can at least have Castro on the roster in September if they need him for any reason. You just don't have to release him or outright him or something like that. Is that what you're kind of like? He plays September and then he's off the postseason roster, I assume.
I think Jason Castro's they're supposed, like you've heard from multiple beat writers, that the Astros are supposed to tell them what's going on with his injury. It's a left knee injury. He had a knee injury last season. He's talked about retirement at the end of the year. And in my eyes, I think it's over. I think Jason Castro is going to hit the 60-day, here shortly, because they need to free open a roster spot for Christian Vasquez. And I think that's the way it goes. I think Jason Castro's tenure is over, sadly. And the way he went out, though, we didn't know that was his last at bat against the New York Mets on June 28th. But a 2-run go-ahead home run for in the 9th inning. I think that's the best way for Jason Castro to go out. But I just don't see a spot on the roster for him come September when the rosters expand.
Let's get to the trade with the biggest question marks. And yes, Astros Twitter, their favorite whipping boy, Jake Odorizzi, goes to the Braves for bullpen lefty Will Smith. Now, in any of these last few years, you'd be thrilled. Will Smith, he's incredible. He closed out the Astros in the World Series, but this year his whip is 1.514. And Kenny, maybe they didn't need a lefty in the bullpen as much as we thought. When you looked at the numbers, the bullpen versus lefties has a 205 batting average against and an OPS against of just 552.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think this was kind of a head scratcher. It's like only Will Smith, for Jake Odorizzi. I guess the contracts kind of make sense. Both of them have options the next year. Overall, I think this was a move just to please Dusty. I think Dusty Baker loves lefties, but the Astros didn't really need a lefty. Like you said, you mentioned the splits, and the splits for Will Smith aren't even that great. I think he has an 800 OPS against righties, which is expected. He's a lefty pitching to righties, but against lefties, it's not as much, as smaller. He's pushing 700. His curveball is nothing what it was. No spin on it anymore. He, gets a lot of whiff behind his pitches. And I think that's going to be a project for the Astros pitching coaches down the stretch to kind of mold Will Smith into the to the lefty that they need out of the bullpen. I just don't think he's going to get a lot of high leverage to start. They're going to resort back to that 8-man bullpen until Lance McCullers comes back. And, as we're recording this, we don't even know if the rotation is going to still be the same. Jose Urquidy has been on the block. Luis Garcia could also be out there. But overall, it's just a really interesting, like one of those shrug kind of trades. I saw someone describe it as that. It's just a pretty meh. I don't think it really changes much. I think Jacob Rizzi would have been a good bullpen pitcher come the postseason. He's been pretty decent in his last couple starts. He's shaky here and there with injuries, but overall, just pretty blah trade.
Did you have a chance at all to look at Will Smith and some of the deeper numbers as far as, I don't know if this, velocity has changed this year, or is there something that we're not seeing that maybe has changed, or was there an injury? Is there anything that can explain his big drop off other than it's not like he's ancient either, but he's been around for a while.
Yeah, he hit the injured list. I think last time he hit the injured list was in 2020. So he's been a pretty durable pitcher. I think, just like I'm going to say, it comes with age. I think stuff just doesn't really work out for him as much anymore. But overall, he's just not seeing the same spin on his curveball. I think his big deal when, again, even against the Astros in the postseason last year is that he produces a lot of whiffs. He gets past a lot of hitters. And when you're not having your curveball do that, it's really just not going to work out for you. And in the end, when your best pitches are breaking pitches, you can't really resort to a fastball that doesn't have a lot of spin behind it, doesn't have a lot of velocity. And I guess I didn't really take a deep look at it yet because, I'm still waiting on the rest of the trades to come in, by 5:00 today. But I think there's just something there that the Astros might like, that they might change in his arsenal, maybe drop the curveball, maybe change his, where he's throwing it from. But, fastball's not very good. He just, produces a lot of chase. And I think that's what the Astros like there.
Do you have more confidence in Phil Maton than you would have in Will Smith going against lefties right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think Phil Maton, he has a good fastball, even though it doesn't have a lot of velocity behind it. He can command it well. He does give into some pretty, I wouldn't say as hard contact, but he gets into some jams like we've seen. But last time out, 2 strikeouts over an inning, and that's good progress for Phil Maton. And we've seen Phil Maton in the postseason. The guy was probably going to be the World Series MVP if the Astros made it to Game 7 and won. But I think, like I said a little bit earlier, I think Will Smith's role is going to be in low leverage, and I think that's going to be where it starts. And by the time they reach the postseason, they'll see where they're going to push him. When those situations happen, when there's lefties in the lineup.
So how do you look at it now? I mean, like we've said, and I'll do a podcast of some sort if there's another trade sometime later this week to talk about any last second deals that the Astros have. We're talking, you and I, just a couple hours before the trade deadline. You'll see me like looking off occasionally because I'm looking for any tweets that are about any kind of deals that the Astros would have. But how do you look at the situation right now? Do you feel like the Astros were able to maintain with the Yankees as these two are kind of going neck and neck into the postseason, and they seem to be on a collision course for the ALCS?
Yeah, I think when we looked at the beginning of the season, it was like Blue Jays Astros. We saw that Blue Jays Astros series, and it was just great. Like, it was back and forth games, just like the Yankees one. And we saw, we got some snippets of what the Yankees and the Astros could be, what it could look like come October. The Yankees have had a good deadline. Brian Cashman's been doing a good job, got Gallo off the books, got a good prospect in return, not to mention he fortified his bullpen even more, got another starter and from the A's. And just overall, that team's looking pretty good. Andrew Benintendi's there, and Aaron Judge is the best player on the planet. It's going to be hard for Yordan Alvarez to really compete with Aaron Judge for the MVP, but he's running away with it right now. And I think 10 home runs in 11 games, something crazy like that. And overall, Judge is really just going to be the difference maker. It depends what kind of Judge you see in October. And the guy's October experience, he's postseason experience. And I think it's a pretty good lock to assume that the Astros and Yankees are going up against each other in the ALCS. There's not many real threats so far, unless there's going to be more trades this afternoon that are really going to compete with those two teams. Those two teams are going to get the first 2 buys. There's no one in the Central that's really going to compete with that. It's like a 3-way, finish right now for the AL Central with the Guardians, the White Sox, and the Twins. And I don't know how that's going to play out, but those teams aren't really going to battle for the World Series.
I'm going to run through just the players that James Click has acquired in 2.5 years, and I'm going to leave out a couple of guys, a couple obvious guys. But Kendall Graveman, Rafael Montero, Ryan Stanek, Hector Neris, Yemi Garcia, Christian Vasquez, Trey Mancini, Will Smith, Phil Maton, and Jake Odorizzi. And Kenny, you go through those names, and they got all of that. And most of those guys have performed extremely well. It's a wait and see, of course, on Vasquez, Mancini, and Smith, but most of them have performed extremely well. Like I said, I'm going to leave a couple guys out, like Pedro Baez. But I mean, James Click, for some reason, I see people on Astros Twitter get mad at this guy. He's not doing enough. He hasn't done anything. He's living off of Jeff Luhnow's coattails. Look, he did all that. And what has he given up? What has he given up, Kenny, for all of those guys that have been super helpful in postseason and beyond?
Exactly. I don't think we'll know for a couple of years from now. You see guys like Chase McDermott might, compete for a roster spot in 2 years, but I think last season was incredible. He fortified one of the best bullpens going into October and barely gave up anything. Brian De La Cruz went to Miami, had an explosive start to his major league career, really didn't do much in the last season. And just looking at what he's given up, and like you said, but when you look at what Jeff Luhnow did, he blew up the farm system to get Zach Greinke. It was a big splash, and we haven't seen that yet. And I'm kind of wondering if that's going to be something James Click is going to try to throw at the deadline. There's some big guys out there that might make this Astros team one of the best, the best team in baseball if they go after somebody. But, he's really held the farm system well. And the guys that he's drafted, I think he's only given up one in Chase McDermott in his last 3 drafts, and the other guys are still around. So I think he's okay moving guys that were, acquired in Luhnow's era and just, keeping the guys that he believes in and what his staff believes in. But overall, I think he's been a really good GM so far for the Astros. And I think the biggest signing, in my opinion, like the one that's probably had the biggest impact, is Ryan Stanek, $1.2 million. Before the 2021 season, he's turned into a high leverage piece that should have been an all-star.
And I'll throw out a couple of other names that I didn't mention because we haven't seen them in the major leagues, but they could really matter down the road. You guys have talked a lot on Astros Future about Logan Cerny. They only gave up Garrett Stubbs for him. You can throw in Johnner Diaz, who was part of the Maton and Miles Straw deal, and that would be just a total heist if he turns out to be a really good hitter in the major leagues as a catcher/first baseman or whatever he is. He's sort of your insurance. I think if Vasquez leaves, I'm not super excited about what I saw from Corey Lee. Maybe there's more to come and better to come, but offensively, he's not going to be good. Johnner Diaz could be a really good offensive catcher for you down the road. So, I mean, that's all part of the equation. And I think when people are judging James Click, you have to remember that. And you also have to remember he hasn't had draft choices because of Jeff Luhnow for the last couple of seasons on the high end. And we're going to get to what he did this year in like 2 seconds. But also, he hasn't had a lot of the minor league guys that Jeff Luhnow did because Jeff Luhnow traded him to get Verlander and to get Greinke and to get Garrett Cole, high-end starters that you had to give up something. It might not have looked like a lot now, but it was a big part of your farm system, and it was good guys to get. But let me move to the Astros draft while I've got you here, because that's one area I'm just completely ignorant, and it's hard to get excited for me and a lot of people because these guys are years away. So what did you think of this year's draft?
I'm not the biggest fan of going after a lot of college talent. I like the high school guys, like to see them develop, especially a high school pitcher is something I really liked, but it made sense. College outfielders were the way to go, and you can extend them to 3 different positions, and first base. And you see guys like Drew Gilbert and Jacob Milton, first and second round selections. Awesome selections. I think Drew Gilbert was a steal that he fell that far to the Astros. He's a villain. He's a villain at Tennessee. People didn't like him. People didn't like his emotion that he put into it. He's going to fit right in with the Astros. He's going to be that fiery center fielder that they could if he develops correctly, he's going to be that fiery center fielder in 2 years, 2 to 3 years for the Astros, turning a lot of heads with the way he plays. He likes to win. Overall, there's a lot of college guys. And I think when I really looked deeper into it, I think college players were the way to go. It's the safest option. You draft some of these seniors out of high school or out of college, and they're going to sign. They have no other choice. And you saved a lot of money. Went after Ryan Clifford, one of the top high school prospects. with the 11th pick, and it made all the sense in the world. James Click, Chris Gross, they did an amazing job trying to get those guys in. Only one guy didn't sign, and Isaiah Jackson, the 18th round pick, outfielder from Arizona, high schooler. It made sense. There wasn't enough money to go after him, but I think he was kind of like the fallback if they weren't going to get Clifford. But going after a lot of shortstops too and pitchers, and there's a lot of molds there. If you can play shortstop, you can play a lot of positions. And the position addition that they have in the Astro system is going to boost these shortstops' chances to make the show one day. And they're not going to be shortstops forever. They're going to move to center field. They're going to move to left field. They're going to have good enough arms to play right at Minute Maid Park someday. They can play first base. So there's a lot of tools in there that the Astros liked. And having pitchers that strike out a lot, don't walk a lot. You can't really teach command. It's a tough thing to teach, but you can teach players how to hone in on strikeouts. And that's what the Astros got in this draft.
Yeah, for those who weren't paying a whole lot of attention, explain what the Astros did in the 11th round. How did they get away with doing that? Why did they do it? And I guess a big part of that, right, is that they had basically went all the way up to their bonus money, is about as close to the line as you could possibly go. And they were able to do that. How did they do that? Because it seems like it's crazy that they were able to get a great value in the 11th round. And just explain that.
Yeah, I'll try to explain this, as easy as I can, but each pick has a slot value. Each pick has a value that, that's what you should be paying them. And you can exceed that to get a guy to actually sign, or you can underslot them, which a lot of teams are doing with college guys because they don't have another option. They're not going to go another professional route and try to make the major leagues a different way. They're going to go to the minor leagues. They're going to, do it the traditional way. And if they underslot players from what they're actually worth, so say a 6th-round pick is worth $600,000. I'm not sure if that's the actual number, but you can underslot them, give them 20,000. What they're not going to say no. I think that's the best way you could explain it. The Astros saved a bunch of money up, and then Ryan Clifford fell to the 11th round because no one believed that he was going to sign. He's committed to Vanderbilt, good high school lefty, and they threw over $1 million at him. I think it was 1.26 million, and he accepted it. He wanted to be an Astro, and the way they saved money by underslotting other picks before him and then throwing everything they had left over is just, it's a great move by the front office.
Where should he have gone?
He was ranked in the top 100. I think 97 might have been his number by MLB Pipeline. So, first 2 rounds, 3rd round at the latest. A lot of those high school guys go earlier because they can throw more money at them based on the slot value.
Do you think that it is no accident that the Astros drafted a couple of center fielders near the top of the draft, considering we have already seen Jose Siri is gone? I don't think they see Chas McCormick as the center fielder of the future. Jake Myers doesn't look all that good. I mean, the Jake Myers that I've watched over the last few weeks is not the one that I was excited about last year. He looks like Chas McCormick and Jose Siri, and that he doesn't have a real command of the strike zone. And the guys that have really had success with the Astros and the ones that they've really loved over the last few years, whether it was Correa or Springer or Kyle Tucker or Yordan Alvarez, have had great command of the strike zone, and he just doesn't. And you can talk about the shoulder injury, you can talk about the arm problems, but my concern, Kenny, with him and looking towards the future is that he is not able to improve a whole lot, because usually if you don't have command of the strike zone by his age, I don't know if it just happens, like 2, 3, 4 years down the road as he develops.
Yeah, he's not proven to be an everyday starter. Even with they gave him almost every single start in center field this month. I think they gave like 2 to Mauricio Dubon and 1 to Jake Meyer, or 1 to Chas McCormick, and they're trying to get as much as they can out of him. The strikeouts aren't new, though. He battled a lot of strikeout issues last season. He chases a lot of pitches more this year. The power is not really there as it was. And I saw you tweet the other day, like, don't really look at Sugarland stats. And I kind of want to agree on that, but I want to build upon it that, they play in the Pacific Coast League, which is all elevation. I think the Space Cowboys and maybe Round Rock are the only 2 stadiums not at high elevation.
Yeah, that's that's part of what I was referring to too. Yeah.
Yeah. And Oklahoma City isn't either. So, they're elevated surfaces, and that's why the numbers are so inflated. And you look at a guy, Corey Lee, didn't really have great numbers, had great numbers the month before he was called up. But the offense isn't there for Jake Myers, and you can never have enough center fielders. Center fielders and shortstops, if you're going after position players, those are your best 2 options. Those are the athletes. Those are the guys who can convert to other positions. I don't think Jacob Milton is a center fielder of the future. I think he's a corner outfielder, maybe a first baseman. He's pretty tall. He's a lefty, and he can play first base. Drew Gilbert's a center fielder, and I think when it comes down to the next couple seasons, those two guys will be, biting at the heels of Pedro Leon and other outfielders that might be approaching AAA.
Yeah, Pedro Leon, that's another thing. I just am not real confident in what I've seen because he's stuck around the whole time he's been in AAA. He's been stuck around 220, 230, 240, very low on average. And the OPS looks great. You go, oh, look at the OPS, it's over 800. But if power numbers are inflated because you're in Sugarland, and walks get inflated in the minor leagues because you're pitching or hitting against pitchers that don't have a whole lot of command, then I got real concerns about Pedro Leon down the road.
Yeah, that's a concern I think everyone's had over the last couple months. But in the month of July, he had more walks than strikeouts. That was the first time he's ever done that in his 2 years of professional baseball. His OPS was the highest it's been. He's kind of quietly getting a little bit better with his plate discipline, and we saw that with Jose Siri a little bit last season in AAA. He started taking pitches more, and that's what Pedro Leon is. He's honing his zone. And I learned from a prospect a couple months ago that the Astros teach it's okay to strike out looking. It's okay to take pitches. You just need to hone in your zone and, draw the box, and understand the strike zone. And I think that's what he's doing more. He might have some more strikeouts looking, but he's walking more. He's taking the pitches. He's taking close pitches because he's getting better at recognizing balls and strikes.
Well, it is exactly 3:24 Central Time as me and Kenny are talking. We have not seen any more trades with the Astros, so we are sorry if there's a Jose Urquidy and Christian Javier and a package to San Diego for Carlos Rodon or something that we missed. But like I said, we'll get to it in the next few days. It's at the Van DeLorean, right, on Twitter?
Correct. It's like the Mandalorian from Star Wars, but with a V.
Fantastic. Go catch him on Astros Future. Also, he puts up all that you can look for his pieces. I'm sure he's tweeting them all out on his Twitter site as well with Sports Illustrated. So great. I mean, I'm just so proud of you as a Mizzou guy, what you're doing. And you and Kenny do a great job over on Astros Future. And I always love hearing you guys. And thanks so much for doing this.
Of course. Thank you for reaching out, and feel free to reach out again.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Don't forget to follow Houston Sports Talk on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, the Google Podcast app, or the Stitcher app. You can support us by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes or by telling your friends about us. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.